Random House Audio presents A Time to Fight, Reclaiming a Fair and Just America by Jim Webb. Read for you by the author.
Part 1. Who Are We? Chapter 1. Scorpions in a Jar. Mr. President, on that I ask for the yeas and nays. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be a sufficient second. The yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will call the roll. These final words, calling for a vote on the Senate floor, have been uttered by the presiding officer from a chair that oversees the entire Senate chamber. In most cases, only a few senators are on the floor, having spoken while standing behind one of 100 desks that form a semicircle in front of the elevated platform where the stiff, seemingly bored presiding officer sits behind a parliamentarian, 2 legislative clerks, and a journal clerk. Committee hearings have been held, memos have been written, recommendations have been drafted, discussions and internal debates have taken place. All that remains is for the individual senator to decide which way he or she will vote. And within 15 or 20 minutes, depending on the rule attached to the legislation, that vote must be cast personally, a yea or a nay offered to the roll clerk sitting just below the presiding officer. Some votes are easy, either because they're perfunctory, such as judicial and military nominations that have already been extensively scrubbed by trusted committee chairmen, or because they're procedural, calling on a senator's loyalty to the party leadership, or because the philosophical arguments are clear. Some votes are enormously difficult. Many involve great stakes for the nation on issues that are far more complex than the inconclusive legislative answers that are being offered. A dilemma that many senators identify as letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Others involve deliberate traps by clever members of the opposing side, meaningless in their true impact because of procedural gimmickry, but designed to soil a voting record of senators up for re-election and to provide fresh fodder for the bombast of the talk show crowd. I'm a junior senator, 95th on the seniority list, and so by Senate standards, my office in the Russell Senate Office Building is less than splendid. But from my personal perspective, my office meets the test. The high ceiling, the ancient fireplace along one wall, the classic furniture, the modern technology evident in the top-of-the-line computer on my desk, all bought and maintained with money that came from hard-working people who have paid for such emoluments through their taxes. Members of my legislative staff, led by the legislative director, enter my personal office to go over the vote and to discuss other possible votes for the day. I sit on a hard-back, wooden-armed chair, facing them as they take their usual seats on the sofa that meets the wall. Above the sofa is a large print of George Washington in military uniform, kneeling in prayer next to his horse at Valley Forge during the Revolutionary War. I brought it to the office when I entered the Senate as one of a host of reminders designed to focus my sense of purpose as I carry out my duties. Samuel Cochran, one of my 4 times great-grandfathers, served in the Virginia line as an enlisted soldier under General Washington. Across the room, amid a wall of family pictures behind my desk, my mother's father, B.H. Hodges, stares out at me from a small picture framed in barnwood, as he has done in every office I've occupied for more than 20 years. My grandfather is just in from his patch of truck farm vegetables, wearing knee-high working boots and bib overalls. He was a fighter, a lonely champion of lost causes who himself lost everything because of the causes he championed. The picture doesn't show it, but he's lame from a busted hip with a long-time wound that still seeps openly through breaks in his skin and will soon die for lack of medical care. Pictures and reminders fill my office. Samuel Cochran, B.H. Hodges, my parents, my wife, my brother and sisters, my fellow Marines from a time of brutal combat in Vietnam, my 5 children and 1 stepdaughter, those who went before me, those who were young with me and grew older by my side, and those who will be here long after I am gone. I owe those who went before me the kind of country they fought to create and wanted to perfect. I have a world-class staff made up of men and women who represent every aspect of American society, capable of researching and debating any issue that confronts our country. The memos have been prepared by whichever staff member is responsible for the subject matter of the vote. On the more important votes, we will already have had numerous discussions. On every vote, I have received and considered their recommendations. On every issue, the approach I have demanded is that my staff focus on substance over politics. On the more complicated votes, I may ask them to debate the matter in front of me. And then it is time to vote. A typical day in the Senate requires several trips to the Senate floor and back, although the journey is usually underground, so that on some days, once I arrive at work, I never see the sun. I walk fast. I have an aversion to wasting time. Given the efficiency of my pace, it takes about 5 minutes to reach the Senate chamber from my office. Normally, I do so through a connecting corridor that begins in the basement of the Russell Building, passing underneath Constitution Avenue, and ending up in the basement of the Capitol. Years ago, when I was serving as Assistant Secretary of Defense and then Secretary of the Navy in the Pentagon, I calculated that I had walked more than 1,000 miles along the maze of corridors between my office and Secretary of Defense Cap Weinberger's. I have no doubt that I will surpass that mileage well before my Senate term expires. From the time I left the Marine Corps after serving as an infantry platoon and company commander in Vietnam, I decided that I would focus on immediate goals that inspired me to devote all of my energy to them, rather than putting together the more cautious and traditional building blocks of a predictable career. I've worked in government, first in the late 1970s when I was the youngest full committee counsel in the Congress, then in the 1980s as a Defense Department official, and now as a senator. I've written 9 books, 6 of them novels, a process that allowed me to spend considerable time overseas and also among widely varying communities here in America as I researched and wrote. I've taught literature at the university level. I've worked on numerous film projects, some of them with Hollywood's top producers and directors. I've traveled widely as a journalist, writing from such locations as Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand. Financially and personally, my life has been one roll of the dice after another. My curiosities have taken me down some pretty strange alleyways to some of the darker, meaner corners of the world. And in that respect, when it comes to examining many of the issues of the day, I have brought to the Senate a different set of experiences, and thus a different reference from most of my colleagues. At the same time, I will admit that I acquired a certain level of cynicism along the way when it comes to the glitter and tinsel side of government and the trappings of power. And coming to the Senate after so many real-world, non-political experiences, I will also admit that this well-honed skepticism is largely intact. But the one connecting dot in all of my experiences has been a passion for history and a desire to learn from it, not from the enumeration of monarchs and treaties that so often passes for academic knowledge, but the surging vitality from below that so often impels change and truly defines cultures. Entrenched aristocracies, however we may want to define them, do not want change. Their desire instead is to manage dissent in a way that does not disrupt their control. But over time, under the right system of government, a free-thinking people have the energy and ultimately the power to effect change. The American experiment, incomplete as it is in its evolution, is the greatest example of the possibility of balancing these two competing impulses. We ebb and flow decade after decade as the better minds among us seek to define the playing field of American success. And we are engaging in this debate as best we can under the principles of true representative government. This leads me, perhaps surprisingly, to my innate distrust of the ornaments of power because even an earned skepticism has its limits. If one has a sense of history and cares for the place of the United States of America as a unique, enduring model of the benefits of democracy, no amount of cynicism can diminish the largeness and even the greatness that surrounds you when you walk the hallways and enter the chambers of the Capitol. The Capitol, quite frankly, humbles me. And for me, it is a particular privilege to walk unescorted and unchallenged along its corridors. Still walking, I reach the far end of the tunnel and ride an escalator up a floor, reaching the basement of the Capitol. From there, I join several colleagues as we take one of the senators-only elevators to the second floor. Almost as in a movie, I step from the solitude of the elevator into a scene of instant chaos. Dozens of senators have been exiting the 4 elevators that open at this narrow corridor. They must now pass through a thick crowd of journalists who have interposed themselves along the corridor, which leads to the doorways of the Senate chamber. The doorway nearest the elevator opens into the Republican side of the Senate. I take a left turn in front of these doors, choosing not to enter them today, and walk along a side corridor that parallels the chamber, heading toward the Democratic side. History surrounds me here. Those who have gone before us have left their mark, both visibly and spiritually.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?